Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I am Ed McCann. I'm the founder of Writers Read, and I'm your host for today's special Carnegie Hall Women's History Month event entitled Women in Music. This is our third collaboration with Carnegie Hall, and we are delighted to return once again to City Winery's beautiful flagship location here in New York City to spend a couple of hours celebrating writers and the spoken word with personal stories of women's achievements in music, both on stage and off. As many of you know, the maximum word count of the personal stories we present on our stage and in our podcast is 650 words, or 2 double-spaced pages, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. We have a rich and varied selection of stories to share with you today, and I thank you all for joining us this afternoon to support good writing and the spoken word. Now, as most of you probably know, it's Oscar night. And that's that once-a-year extravaganza when Hollywood's brightest and most hopeful stars dress up to be seen walking down that red carpet, which, shocker, is not red this year. It's champagne-colored. I read that in the Times this morning, that they, for the first time in decades, they have changed it from red to champagne. And someone said, this may be a signal that there's not going to be any bloodshed after the slap last year. I don't know about you, but I have never met anyone who walked on Oscar's carpet before meeting the writer who opens Act 1 of today's show. Lynn Ahrens was born a lyricist, setting her own words to the tune of Frosty the Snowman at just 3.5 years of age. In her first job out of college, as a secretary in a New York advertising agency, she spent her lunch hours playing guitar and writing songs. Soon thereafter, she became a mainstay singer-songwriter for the famed animated series Schoolhouse Rock. And if you learned while watching Saturday morning TV how conjunctions worked, or how a bill becomes law, or you can sing the preamble to the Constitution, you owe a small credit to Lynn, who opens Act 1 of today's special Women's History Month Carnegie Hall show, Women in Music. Lynn has gone on to great acclaim with her extensive work in theater, film, and television, with projects including such gems as the Broadway musicals Ragtime, Anastasia, Seussical, and Once on This Island. The honors Lynn has earned include a Tony, an Emmy, and Oliver Awards, as well as nominations for 2 Oscars, 4 Grammys, and an introduction into the Theater Hall of Fame. She's published many short stories and essays, but her art always returns to rhyme. We are delighted Lynn could join us this afternoon to give us the inside scoop on her personal Oscar night, red carpet and all, with her story, Going Hollywood. Please give a very warm Writers Read welcome to Lynn Ahrens.
On a February morning in 1998, I'm in the shower when the phone rings. A minute later, my husband hands the receiver through the shower door. "Hi," a woman says. "I'm from the Asbury Park Press. Have you heard? You've been nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Song and Best Score." I scream, grab a towel, kiss my husband, and race to call my mother. "How wonderful," she cries. "It's an honor just to be nominated." And there it is, the tiny pinprick in the bubble of joy, my mother's special way of protecting me from life's inevitable disappointments. You see, I'm the lyricist for the 20th Century Fox animated feature film Anastasia, and we're up against one of the biggest movies of all time, James Cameron's Titanic. Our nominated song, Journey to the Past, will compete with My Heart Will Go On, sung by Celine Dion. And even my mother knows we're going to lose. I have not worn a dress since high school, but now I'm going to the Oscars, and friends assure me that designers will come flocking with outfits and jewelry. The film's PR person assures me otherwise. "Sorry, dear, no one's ever heard of you." Off I trudge to Bloomingdale's, Bendel's, Bergdorf's, bargain basements, and bridal boutiques, rummaging hopelessly through jungles of long gowns, until there it is, a champagne-laced blazer, exquisitely embroidered all over with tiny crystals and matching satin pants. The outfit is wildly expensive, but it's marked half price, and I also find perfect shoes on sale. From head to toe, I'm a vision in non-refundable glamour. At home, I try on my Oscar outfit again and slowly realize why the price was reduced. The crystals embroidered along the arms of the blazer snag on the lace. If I let my arms touch my sides, they stick there and must be torn away with brute force, leaving tiny tatters. If anyone else wearing lace tries to hug me, we'll stick together like Velcroed sausages. I realize I'll have to walk the red carpet with my arms held out like a ballerina in first position. We touch down in LA and are promptly hustled off to the pre-Oscars, cocktails with composers, brunch with British filmmakers. At the nominees luncheon, more than 50 of us are assembled on a stage to receive certificates. Inexplicably, this year, they've decided to call us in reverse alphabetical order. David Zippel is first and heads back to his table. My collaborator, Stephen Flaherty, is somewhere in the middle. Helena Bonham Carter smiles pityingly as she leaves. Ben Affleck is a no-show, and I'm last. By the time I'm freed, the food is gone, and so are the guests. The afternoon of the awards, the PR lady restrains us from entering the screaming arena called the red carpet. Not yet, she says. Waiting in the crowded plastic tent, we're blocking not only the door, but Jack Nicholson, Matt Damon, and Kate Winslet. But at last, 15-year-old Tara Lipinski arrives. Tara Lipinski, who skated to Olympic gold with our nominated song. Stay close to Tara, the PR lady calls, shoving us out into the fray. No one's ever heard of you. Still, the sun is high, the sky is blue, and Joan Rivers yells, "I like your outfit." By the time we arrive at the Shrine Auditorium, my arms are aching, but I'm feeling practically zen. That evening, when the Best Song category is finally announced, Madonna calls the nominees' names and pronounces mine incorrectly. Lynn Ahrens. Then she opens the envelope and says in a monologue, "Oh, what a shocker," as Celine Dion rises, hands clasped, looking exactly like an Oscar statuette. But the night is filled with parties and promise. Lights glitter like the crystals on my beautiful jacket. The air is velvet. 20th Century Fox has given us a limo and driver, and I'm the youngest and best-dressed lyricist I'll ever be again. I hear my mother's voice, soft and sweet. It's an honor just to be nominated. And it is. Off we fly through the mysterious Los Angeles streets, wrapped in our own personal bubble of joy.
A few years ago, a producer named Julia Phillips wrote a book. I think it was called "You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again." And it was about her experiences in Hollywood. And she described what it was like to actually attend the Oscar ceremonies, which are all timed for an East Coast audience, and how weird it is that everyone is in evening gowns at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and limousines and all of that, but also the energy in the room, that everyone is so hopeful at the top. But as the ceremony goes on, the room fills up with losers. You know what I mean? And it's just, the whole thing feels very different as it moves along. Sharon Forman is a Reformed rabbi, teacher, writer, and mother, raised in Norfolk, Virginia. She holds degrees from Yale University, Columbia Teachers College, and Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Her writing can be found on and offline, including a tiny love story in the New York Times, Literary Mama, and JewishFiction.net. Her short play, Elishiva, was performed in 2022 at the Jewish Theater of Oklahoma, and Sharon is also the author of The Baseball Haggadah, a festival of freedom and springtime in 15 innings. She lives with her husband and baseball-obsessed adult children in Westchester, New York, where she teaches bar and bat mitzvah students. And today, Sharon will tell us how her musical childhood, which she shared with the violin and Beethoven, still resonates for her every day, as you'll hear in her story, Happy Voices, Happy Flow. Please say hello to Sharon Forman.
In my childhood home, music was the third element of our particular version of the Trinity, along with academics and Jewish learning. I studied violin and piano, practicing Bach, Schubert, Vivaldi, and Chopin. I also figured out chords to some less revered guitar classics, like Rainbow Connection and Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley. During my senior year in high school, I skipped lunch, once a week to take harp lessons with an itinerant music specialist provided by the Norfolk, Virginia Public School District. That spring, I joined forces with other lunch skippers in an all-city harp ensemble, and all that was missing from our Lawrence Welk show moment in the giant performing arts venue was a profusion of bubbles. Classical music emanated from radios in our house and car, and my conservatory-trained pianist mother quizzed the 4 kids about time signatures and composers. Other carpool moms hummed along to Kenny Rogers, Captain and Tennille, Stevie Wonder, or Air Supply. With my mom, you had a choice: the news program, All Things Considered, or Beethoven. My dad, a bit more flexible, let my mother rule the airwaves on family trips, only occasionally sneaking in a few bars of the Irish Rovers or Roberta Flack when my mom nodded off. She teased that she had 4 children just so she could be serenaded by her own live-in string quartet. Forever the Jan to my sister's Marcia Brady, I played the humdrum second violin part, but the real drama lay in watching my mom tear up every single time we kids tuned our instruments. In college, I asserted my independence by leaving my violin at home. For the first time, I acknowledged that I did not enjoy the sensation of the strings vibrating underneath my fingers. I didn't much like the way my neck twisted or the way I lost feeling in my red chin after hours of orchestra practice. My ear was more developed than my talent. The violin would stay in its case. But I could not envision a world in which I did not create music. A new friend dragged me to auditions for freshman chorus in a cheerful music room with bright overhead lights, giant windows, and a glorious piano. We sang madrigals, football medleys, spirituals, motets, and more versions of Ave Maria than a rabbi's daughter had any business knowing. Without any formal vocal training, however, my luck ran out sophomore year when I auditioned but was not selected to participate in the venerable Yale Glee Club. I had no strategies for sight singing, no understanding of diaphragmatic breathing, larynx tension, or vibrato control. Although I could read music and follow a conductor, loving music was not enough. My roommates encouraged me not to give up and kept me singing that year as they joined me in raucous study break choruses of ill-fated Tom Dooley. The next fall, the Glee Club must have suffered from a shortage of first altos, and they gave me a spot on their risers. I never missed a rehearsal and proudly donned the woman's uniform, which resembled the sartorial selection of the man on the box of Quaker Oats. I practiced and memorized songs in Dutch, German, Swedish, and Latin. I even held my nose and learned Harvard's fight song. We sang in churches, amusement parks, school auditoriums, and university stages. I learned that not many things teach you to resist peer pressure as much as singing the inner voice of the alto line and not wandering off to the main melody with the rest of the confident sopranos. At the end of each concert, we sang the crowd favorite, "'Neath the Elms." Let no ruder sounds replying break our happy voices flow, break our happy, happy voices flow. At moments during rehearsals, I would quiet my voice and float in the buoyant sea of music flowing around me.
As a child, it was the cello that most intrigued Elizabeth Rosen Mayer. Even the word, which sounded like jello, delighted her. Unfortunately, she was too small to play it, and so instead took up the violin. This seemed a perfect fit, and her many performances in New York recital halls began at the age of 12. In college, she changed her mind about the violin and studied English instead. And this was fortuitous, since her background in music and English made her a natural as a speechwriter, marrying rhythm and sound to language. Since then, Elizabeth has written speeches for 5 of CUNY's chancellors and many presidents of colleges and nonprofit organizations. She still plays the violin occasionally, and in her story, Lilo, Elizabeth honors a teacher who understood the links between learning music and learning how to live. Please give a warm Writer's Read welcome to Elizabeth Rosen Mayer.
I began studying violin at age 4. My violin teacher would introduce every piece by playing it first, so I would hear how it should sound. I learned music largely by imitation. The system worked. By the time I entered college, I had won several music awards and scholarships. My usual violin teacher was away on tour, and Lilo was his substitute. After our first lesson, she asked me to play the Beethoven Romance, and then said, "Go back to the high D." I was flummoxed and began where I thought she meant. It took a bit of hunting and pecking till I found the passage she wanted to hear. She then said calmly, "So you can't read music, can you?" In 5 minutes, she had uncovered the secret I had managed to hide from every teacher and conductor. I was flying blind, navigating by ear. I could not read a note above the G at the top of the clef. Lilo spotted what I had devoted years to hiding. After that first lesson, I vowed I would find her again. Some years later, I did. Lilo was a sought-after coach to various members of the New York Philharmonic String Section. She advised me that in order to be a good teacher, you had to remember what it was like to be stupid. It was that memory. It was that memory of not knowing that allowed her to explain our mistakes with such clarity. Once you became her student, she became an X-ray machine, able to zero in on every secret you wanted to hide, musical and otherwise. Lilo approached teaching as if correct playing was a matter of life and death. An error in rhythm was not only an affront to Bach, it was a threat to the very order of civilization. She grew up in Berlin before the war in a family of observant Jews. Her father, an accomplished musician, was her teacher. As a teenager, Lilo was sent by train to compete for entrance into a conservatory in Paris. On board, she purchased a forbidden ham sandwich and hid in the bathroom, scarfing it down in a locked stall. She discovered that she loved ham. But it was not until the train passed into France that she learned that Nazis had marched into Berlin. She never saw her family again. String players became her next family. In dark moments, she wondered if it was the ham she ate that had caused some kind of rift in the cosmos. People said of her that she played like the devil, but I came to see that she played to escape the devil. We used to go out for dinner on Sundays after our 2-hour marathon lessons. Over a hefty scotch, she asked me about my boyfriend. I was about 2 sentences in when she announced, You are not in love with him. Every time I see my Jack, she told me, my heart skips a beat. She had left her first husband for Jack. Wait for that love, she said. I did, and eventually found my Jack. She told me to let the people you love know that you love them, even if you hate them at the moment. Just like when you hate the Mendelssohn, you still love it. For Lilo, musicianship and life were not separate pursuits. The skills you needed in both were the same. You had to use everything to hear properly. That ability to use all her senses endeared her to many, but it never quite filled the hole in her heart. Only playing did that. I watched Lilo survive the death of her beloved Jack, watched her become the darling of cardiac rehab after her first heart attack, watched her suffer through her daughter's legal troubles. She never stopped teaching or practicing. Why would I? I'm not perfect, you know. In her 90th year, she gave a valedictory solo concert at Carnegie Recital Hall. The concert calls were rock star stuff, and afterward there was a reception. Refreshments included ham.
Born in Chicago to a funny mother, Wendy Goldman would hop the L downtown to study improv at Second City, where she was hooked. And she began her career as an actress and company member of the famed LA comedy troupe, The Groundlings. She and her fellow groundling Judy Toll created an original musical, basically so that they could have really big parts and sing in front of a large group of people. Their musical, Casual Sex, was a surprise hit and launched the award-winning film adaptation for producer Ivan Reitman and Universal Studios. Wendy went on to have a long career as a writer-producer on loads of TV shows for ABC, HBO, Warner Brothers, and 20th Century Fox, including the MTV series Faking It. But she continues to improvise her way through life. And in addition to her ongoing writing pursuits, she teaches workshops here in New York and inspires creativity as a writing coach. Despite her years living in other cities, she refuses to lose her Chicago accent, which you may or may not notice as she reads her personal women in music story, Impossible, in which Wendy channels Billie Holiday in the most unlikely of places. Please welcome back to the Writers' Read stage, Wendy Goldman.
My husband Nick and I have these songs we make up. Funny ones. Funny to us, anyway. A song about Mrs. Florence Dooling, our landlady in Beverly Hills adjacent. A song about shelling peas. A song to signal it's time to leave a really boring party. The last song we make up is on a Sunday in June in the parking lot after the movie Mission Impossible. Words to the theme song. Mission impossible, possible. There are a couple verses, very suspenseful. We sing it in harmony down Ventura Boulevard. It's a good barbecuing day, and the plan now is to buy ourselves the grill of Nick's dreams. Nick has very specific barbecuing needs. It must be a guy thing or a coming from Texas thing. Anyway, the search is on for Weber perfection. Mission impossible, possible. Hours later, store after store later, Nick's in the backyard firing up the shiny blue grill. Had to be blue. And the tools, wrapped in canvas, secured with leather, had to be Williams-Sonoma. He looked so content out there, sipping beer, corn on the cob all snug in aluminum foil. I love our house, he says, and I do too. We dine by candlelight and have to say it's our most successful chicken ever. So that's Sunday, and by Wednesday, Nick is gone. While I'm at work, he files a change of address at the post office, empties his closet, and erases his files from the computer that we share. Gone forever. He says he loves somebody named Suzanne. Who's Suzanne? And they're getting married, probably soon, and he understands if I hate him. He isn't coming back to our house. He's staying somewhere. Won't say where. But it doesn't really matter because nothing he says is true anymore. Maybe nothing he'd ever said. A month after Nick leaves, I love that word leaves. It's so calming. A month after Nick disappears, I get a raspberry seed caught in my teeth and a bad infection, which means gum surgery. Somehow, I drag myself out of bed, even shower, and I put on something other than my nightgown, but still loose in the waist, easy to cry in, which I do on the drive over the hill to Dr. Leslie Levine's office. I'm reclining in his leather chair, my mouth numb and slack. Every breath sends me another sweet whiff of nitrous oxide. So deliciously melty. I have my nitrous and Billie Holiday singing on headphones. Now, why was I there again? Far away, Dr. Levine is saying, I really hate to do it, but then his nurse calls, Wendy, Wendy, which I know is me. But why? Not when I'm sailing away on even deeper breaths. A man's hand touches my face. I'm afraid I'm going to have to pull that tooth. Too much damage there. The hand lightly strokes my cheek. I'm sorry, he says. I nod. Me too. But I don't remember anymore where the pain was, which tooth it was. An instant later, or maybe 10 minutes, I'm worried. What if the tooth is in the front and it's missing when I smile? Or wait, that'll be so funny. Like on I Love Lucy when she dresses like a hillbilly. Maybe I should ask to see a mirror, though. But how can I open my eyes when Billy's starting a new song? Ooh, what a little moonlight will do. Dr. Levine says she'd let me do anything to her. I know, says his nurse. They sound surprised or concerned. It's true. I would have let him. Billy is losing herself to love again. A man is softly smoothing my hair. Here goes, he says. Here I go. His fingers part my lips a little more. There's a click of metal against my teeth, then a twist and a cracking noise. I should really ask to see a mirror. Before it's too late.
Zosia Skorko is no stranger to New York State's I-87 corridor, or the Thruway, which you use to drive upstate, where many of you believe is anything north of 125th Street. Zosia grew up in Lake George and attended Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, and after a 10-year detour to Brooklyn, Zosia reclaimed her roots in 2020, settling with her husband in the Hudson Valley. Zosia taught math in the New York City public schools and is now a school improvement coach, work that calls her back to the city a couple of times a week, enjoying that beautiful train ride along the river whenever possible. Zosia enjoys playing and listening to music and aspires to be able to run for 5 miles, all in a row, on the carriage trails near her home. We're happy to have Zosia and her husband Justin and their friends here in the house this afternoon. And in a special accommodation, and at Zosia's request, her Women in Music story, A Reprieve, will be performed by writer, actress, and frequent Writers' Read contributor, Ann Casapini. Ann Casapini.
My husband and I are musicians. So when our daughter, Anya, was born, it was a given that she would be exposed to music. We had no idea what to expect. Do musicians' children naturally love music? What should we do at what age to encourage that? Which instrument would she choose? When she was just months old, we played music for her, live and recorded. We knew she was too young to react in a way identifiable as interest, but hoped it was forming beneath the surface. As time passed, she developed into a cautious and smiley baby, but often displayed an unimpressed expression when viewing performances, such as when friends would attempt to make her laugh by making silly faces. Music was sometimes met with the same response. Still other times, she'd smile and bob her head to the beat of a song. Music was clearly appealing, at least some of the time, so we weren't too worried. True concern arose when, at 7 months old, Anya developed a flu that wouldn't go away. We took her to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with leukemia and a 65% chance of survival. Treatment would entail many months of chemotherapy and us living full-time in the hospital. It all seemed insurmountable at first. Slowly, with the help of friends, family, and crucial hospital staff, we acclimated to our new reality. Then we met Megan. Masked, but smiling at the eyes, Megan was a music therapist who visited regularly with her guitar, a cheerful demeanor, and easy-to-play instruments like tambourines, egg shakers, and other fortifying noisemakers. Some days we would all participate in informal jam sessions. Other times, Megan would sing and play guitar solo, inserting Anya's name into the lyrics. Again, Anya's reactions to these musical interludes varied. One day, she would gurgle along with Megan singing or bounce on her diapered bottom to the guitar. The next, stare at us with a serious expression on her face. In these moments, I wondered, what was she thinking? Was she feeling sick? Or just not into the music? With Anya's second birthday came her second relapse and a heartbroken awareness that we were running out of options. We spent Christmas 2018 in the hospital for an experimental treatment, the only one left in the doctor's toolkit. Megan, the musical therapist, continued to visit and even made a holiday appearance with her a cappella group. Anya pretended to conduct the singers, waving her small arms. Everyone was smiling, but all I could do was cry. 2 weeks later, we were informed the treatment had not worked. Over the past year and a half, we'd experienced the relief of treatment going well, the descent into uncertainty after each relapse, and now, ultimately, Anya's last week of life. The disease moved quickly, taking over her mind and body quicker than anticipated. We were plunged into previously unthinkable circumstances. She was visibly uncomfortable, scared, and soon became disoriented, saying yes when asked if she wanted food or to be read to, a couple of seconds later saying no, pushing away the plate or book. Our cheerful, easygoing child was slipping away, and we had no idea how to comfort her. Then Megan walked in with her guitar, and we asked Anya if she should play. Anya looked at her and said only yes. Megan strummed gently, shedding silent tears, no vocals this time. Anya closed her eyes and leaned her head against my husband's shoulder as he held her, a reprieve. Anya knew what she needed. Her eyes closed indefinitely shortly after that. I was aware of the power of music, but to see it in that moment was almost startling. I had been so desperate for a way to comfort Anya. Megan bestowed it in the shape of a guitar. Though Anya didn't always show it, it became clear that music was an essential part of our daughter's short life. Music was there when Anya needed it most.
Minnette Coleman is a member of the prestigious Harlem Writers Guild, and she grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, where as a teenager she launched her writing career with entertainment reviews for the Atlanta Daily World. A drama major at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, Minnette appeared in several productions where she discovered she was just as comfortable acting on stage as she was wielding a pen. She's the author of 3 historical novels, The Blacksmith's Daughter, No Death by Unknown Hands, and The Tree, A Journey to Freedom. She's also written a one-man play entitled Oh Freedom, and her most recent novel, The Hair Women, will be published later this year. In the story she presents today, Diva Lessons, Minnette reveals the things she learned from her idol, Leontine Price, and applied to her own life. Please join me in welcoming back to the Writers' Read stage, Minnette Coleman.
I have always been a diva. For my first grade holiday play, I was cast as the Virgin Mary. I was excited until I realized Mary had no lines. Bored by the end of the production, I sat in the manger, baby Jesus in one arm, and a finger up my nose. Afterwards, my embarrassed mother chastised me. Minnette, Aida doesn't pick her nose on stage. Would Leontine Price do that? And with that, I felled my first diva lesson. I adored Mary Violet Leontine Price the first time I heard her beautiful, powerful voice. The first African-American soprano to receive international acclaim, we collected all her albums. Back then, NBC affiliates in 11 southern states refused to telecast performances with Miss Price in the leading role. It didn't matter. We knew prima donna assoluta was opera royalty. Photos and articles of her global performances and exploits amazed me. At the age of 6, I wanted to be the diva who looked like me. At 14, I realized I was no operatic soprano. Longing to grace the stage like my idol, I started acting. My first college play, I created a pre-performance routine beginning with push-ups, as Miss Price is known to do, and vocal warm-ups as if I was singing at La Scala. Finally, while putting on makeup, I sang "I'm the Greatest Star." You can't get more diva than that. On and off stage, I worked on being the complement to everything Price. For my theatrical swan song, I had 2 days to memorize lines and rehearse. It was demanding, but I was always prouder than Price's Aida and as regal as her Cleopatra. I even attributed my confidence to her. She once told an interviewer, "I sang Cleopatra all over the world, and I sing the hell out of it." So I acted the hell out of every character I portrayed. That was my goal for my last role, but I was anxious because my lines were in a language I don't speak. Price speaks and sings in Italian with a Mississippi accent. I rehearsed those first lines so much, opening night Spanish sounded like my native tongue, save my Georgia accent. The cast stood in the wings applauding me. Some even shouted, "Diva!" Ooh, I got goosebumps. A gracious diva, Price always required respect. Rumor has it that during a production of Aida, a well-known mezzo-soprano got a standing ovation and returned backstage, smugly declaring, "I never understood why this opera is called Aida. It should be called Amneris, after my character." Unimpressed, Price went on to perform her aria and received a much louder and longer standing ovation. Bravos and applause followed her off stage as she pointed out to the stunned mezzo-soprano, "My dear, that's why it's called Aida." The final week of my last show, I recalled that tale when a cast member criticized me for cutting my hair for my character, an expat living in Cuba. I had never cut mine, she said. "Why, you're not even the star." I responded with absolute prima donna eloquence. "There are no small parts, only small actors." The look on her face told me that was her first diva lesson. We got a standing ovation for the closing performance. That meant I finished at the top of my game. My new career was writing everything from poetry to novels, still doing my diva warm-up before speaking engagements. Though I've never met prima donna assoluta, I feel I know her. I continue to be a diva in every phase of my life, still proud as Aida and as regal as Cleopatra, even when I'm pushing a buggy in the grocery store. Recently, while shopping, I bumped into a woman talking on the phone. Though I humbly apologized, she mumbled, "Bitch." In my most vibrant voice, I responded, "No, diva." When the woman turned to look at me, I gave her my most gracious smile. Isn't that what Leontine Price would do?
Writers Read is a literary nonprofit organization with a mission to create and promote performance opportunities for writers. And in a publishing environment where it's often challenging to find or hear new voices, we take that mission seriously and worked hard to create this quality platform for writers and an entertaining and memorable experience for you, our friends, and our guests. At a time when the world around us can feel so negative and uncertain, gathering like this to share stories and fellowship and wine can feel like a real gift and something that nourishes us all. Our volunteer editorial team places a strong emphasis on the craft of writing, and they read dozens and sometimes over 100 submissions on each topic before selecting the stories that we present and record at events like this one, many of which have a second life in the podcast that we launched as part of Carnegie Hall's citywide Spring Festival in April of 2021. And I will also say that it is very, very difficult to have to pass on good work, because we produce a show like this with 12 or 14, or as I'm pushing it today, 15 pieces. Because how much can we really ask you to sit through? But it's we really see so much good work, and we are working to find other ways to serve that mission to promote writers. And we had done some publishing briefly, and may return to that again. But I'm proud of what we're building. I encourage you to follow our podcast. Each episode features 3 stories from our themed events, plus a meditation on or essay on writing from a writer, a segment we call Between the Lines, which is a piece about anything that relates to the writing life. And our ambition is to scale up, to attract more writers, more followers, more listeners, and to establish a home on public radio where we belong, a change that will make our podcast and the words of these talented writers available to a broader national audience. We've had some important financial help this year with a very welcome grant from the Nancy Friday Foundation, which is named for its groundbreaking founder, the author Nancy Friday, who, among her other passions, wished for her legacy to support emerging writers and the organizations that support them. Beyond the occasional grant, we have been largely self-funded since our inception, but I've always believed that the return on the investment of all this time and effort and talent and money would come through underwriting and sponsor support. We're not quite there yet. And while a portion of the tickets you purchase for today's show do flow through to us from City Winery, our primary funding comes from you, our friends and our donors. And those are funds that help offset some of our basic operating costs. So if you are enjoying today's show, you can help us grow, and your donations, your investment in our mission to create these opportunities for writers will help take us to the next level. So I speak directly from my heart to ask for your support. Please consider a tax-deductible gift today in any amount to help us get there. On the back of your program, you will find a link to and a scannable code that will take you to the donation page of our website, with options for a credit card or PayPal, and even an address where you can mail a check. I thank you all for listening and for being here with us this afternoon. We are going to pause for a short break here of, I'm going to say 20 minutes, during which our servers can take food orders and refill your glasses, and you will hear more music that directly relates to the stories that we're presenting this afternoon. So when you hear this bell, which, as some of you know, is from my childhood, this is what my mother called us to dinner, by the way. I'm the youngest of 6, and if you didn't come the 3rd time, it was not a good thing. Please head back to your seats for a second half with stories about Diana Ross, Mary Clayton, Bette Midler, Patti Smith, and others. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Writers Read. Lights up. Welcome back to the second half of today's special Women in Music show. Hello, hello. Before we bring up the next writer, I want to remind you that we are always working to feature new and diverse voices, and we are accepting submissions for upcoming shows. And we're always interested in essays for Between the Lines, which is a regular feature of the podcast that I hope that you'll follow. And that's the place that we invite writers of all genres to share their stories about any aspect of writing and the writing life. And there are examples on the website under the News tab. We have featured, early on, Suzanne McConnell contributed a piece about her time at the Iowa Writers' Workshop when Kurt Vonnegut was her instructor, and it's really a remarkable piece. And then a piece from Sally Schwartz, who's a humor columnist for the Chicago Tribune, who wrote that for her to write, she needs it to be absolutely quiet. She can't write unless it's quiet. She also can't write if the dishwasher hasn't been unloaded. And she can't write if her hair isn't tied back. And it was really a piece about all the ways that she has found to procrastinate. So, absolutely anything that relates to the writing life for those pieces. And those are also pieces that you don't necessarily have to appear on our stage to present. You can record them as a voice memo on your phone and email them. And we use them that way. So do check them out. You'll find more detailed information under the submissions tab on our website, writersread.org, where you can also sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter at the bottom of any page. And I know we all want more email, but we just send one twice a month, and that will tell you about upcoming events, submission deadlines, and special events like this one. And so you'll find more information in your program. And you would be doing us a great service if you took that program with you today. Don't leave it behind. Bring it with you and give it to one writer in your life that you know, to tell them about what we're doing, because it is really how we're building community and building out this range of voices. And if you or they need a little extension on that submission deadline or have questions or suggestions, you can always email me through the website or ed@writersread.org. There are so many special guests in the house this afternoon, and as I was thinking about all the people I wanted to thank for their support today, I had a memory that bubbled up from a long ago Oscar night when actress Maureen Stapleton won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Reds, and that was with like Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton and Jack Nicholson. And she was so stunned when she walked up to the podium and she was clutching her Oscar and the music and the applause. And she said famously, "I'd like to thank everyone I ever met in my entire life." But I would just like to briefly thank a few of the people who helped make this day possible, from the folks here in the house, from Jonah on audio, from the servers that are keeping us fed and watered. But I'm also grateful to my partner and executive producer, Richard Colath, to our editors, Stephen Lewis, David Masello, Lisa Donati-Mayer, and Rhonda Zangwill, to our production manager, chief technology officer, and troubleshooter, Sarah Caldwell, who assembled the music playlist and is here tending to the camera. But most especially today to Jim Russick, a man who has shared a great deal of his time and creativity and marketing expertise to help steer Writers Read toward a brighter future. I am deeply grateful to Jim and to the other volunteers who share my passion and who continue to help grow and shape this organization. And let's give them a round of applause of their very own. Mamie Parris is a native of Fort Worth, Texas, and she arrived in New York City with little more than her talent. She studied the American Musical and Dramatic Academy and countless other musical theater hopefuls, and is today considered one of Broadway's preeminent belters, known for her one-of-a-kind rendition of Andrew Lloyd Webber's iconic song, Memory, from the musical Cats. In addition to her work with Lloyd Webber, she's played in many other beloved shows, including Ragtime, 110 in the Shade, On the 20th Century, and The Drowsy Chaperone. Originally trained as a coloratura soprano, she has also sung at such renowned venues as the Goodspeed Opera House and Pittsburgh's Civic Light Opera. She now lives in the Pocono Mountains with her husband, Jonathan, and Shih Tzu mix Cookie. And we're delighted to welcome Mamie to our Writers Read stage just a bit west of Broadway to open Act 2 of our special Carnegie Hall Women in Music show with her ghostly story, The Landlord. Please welcome Mamie Parris.
Just like in the movies, I arrived in New York at 17 with a little rolling suitcase and $50 in my pocket. First stop was the beautiful, historic Ansonia, the building I could draw from memory after staring at it on the cover of the American Musical and Dramatic Academy brochure for months. The building that would house my acting, voice, and dance classes for the next 2 years. I remember it 2 ways. One in noisy, bustling color, in time and tempo of the humanity all around. The second in soaring grayscale cinematic glory. A Turner classic movie with love letter shots of the crisply shadowed architecture of the city. 20 blocks uptown, my shared studio apartment had no kitchen. My roommate and I cooked on a hot plate and washed dishes in the sink in the bathroom, a room I can only describe as a 1930s gender reveal nightmare. Baby blue tile, baby blue sink, baby blue tub, baby blue toilet. The only thing in the place that was actually mine was the burgundy cotton coverlet I had bought with my mom, spread neatly on my little twin bed, shoved tightly in a corner by the closet. My roommate had the bed by the window. That first night, despite the excitement of orientation the next morning, I was sleeping quite peacefully. The room was dark and warm, and being on the 14th floor, rather quiet. Then, I awoke in the darkness to a strange electric feeling. I looked around. There, just a few feet inside the door, was the shape of a man, staring at me. He wore pastels, I think, though the shade was hard to discern, as he appeared filtered somehow, behind rolling waves of light. His form faded as it got closer to the floor, so while I could make out his light hair, the shape of his eyeglasses, the cut of his sweater and pants, he had no shoes or feet to speak of. We stayed locked in a wordless gaze. Then, suddenly, he moved, gliding across the small room until he was next to my bed, his translucent legs appearing to graze my burgundy coverlet. I lay absolutely still. I was not frightened, but curious. Was this a dream? Some stress-induced supernatural fantasy? Now at my bedside, he leaned at the waist, slowly tilting his head over mine. My pulse quickened. Only inches from me, I could see his face clearly, could almost smell him. My heart pounded in my throat. I shut my eyes tightly, squeezed them closed for 2 minutes, 3, and when I opened them, he was gone. No strange feeling, no electricity, just moonlight and shadows. 2 decades later, after performing in 6 Broadway shows at 5 different theaters, I'm no stranger to stories of haunting. During School of Rock at the Winter Garden, a theater built originally in the 19th century for the show and sale of horses, I was regaled more than once with stories of an equine ghost who galloped through backstage passageways. In Cats, at the Neil Simon Theater, 7 years after I had been in that same theater with the Lynn Ahrens remarkable revival of Ragtime, there was an undeniable energy, a feeling you were never really alone, especially in my cozy, windowless dressing room just feet from the stage. I love hearing and sharing these ghost light stories because it reminds me that the important task I set out to do each night, storytelling through music, has roots almost too deep to comprehend. Perhaps my ghostly gentleman caller knew the excitement I felt arriving in New York to begin my Broadway journey because he had once done the same. Perhaps his visit was an initiation of sorts, a reminder that I am only the latest in an art form that many of us are so drawn to, we find it difficult to leave, even after death.
Reyna Martyr Gentin is a recovering attorney who spent most of her career appealing the convictions of murderers, drug dealers, and thieves, among others, clients who often inspire the characters in her fiction. Since leaving practice, Reyna has happily embraced the writing life where the law plays a role in her novels. These include Unreasonable Doubt, My Name is Layla, and most recently published Both Are True. Reyna's husband likes to tell people that they met when he was captain of the high school football team and she was head cheerleader. In truth, they met in the high school orchestra, where he was an all-state cellist and she was, in her own words, a very mediocre violinist. Reyna, her husband, and their 2 kids live in Westchester County, sometimes even in perfect harmony. In Playing for Time, the personal story Reyna presents today, she recalls how her early training opened her eyes and her heart to the restorative power of music, even in the most desperate circumstances. Please give a warm welcome to Reyna Gentin.
The high school orchestra in my Long Island hometown in the 1980s was not for the faint of heart. For starters, no matter how generally mediocre, with notable exceptions, the students were at playing their chosen instruments, and I was a prime example of a barely functional violinist, our conductor insisted that we play the great symphonies of Beethoven, Brahms, and Mozart in the original. There were no watered-down versions or simplified scores. For our own good, or so we were told, it was sink or swim with the classical masterpieces. But the real challenge was not the music, but the conductor. Mr. T was a musician of such depth and capability that his very presence the last period of each day in the second-floor rehearsal room in our public high school was a matter of deep mystery. Why wasn't he conducting the New York Philharmonic instead of slumming it with us? In addition to Mr. T's determination that we play the authentic music, he demanded that we play it well, regardless of our ability. He achieved his goals not with standard pedagogy, but with sarcasm and a cutting tongue. He lashed out at us in a quiet, controlled way when we played out of tune, failed to count the beats, or bowed out of sync. Mr. T conducted with such force that he often broke out into a sweat, drops plopping from his bald head onto his music stand as he jabbed his baton in the air. He was a perfectionist, and he believed in us. Even the bravest students sometimes were afraid of him. Others disliked him. I thought he was great. Granted, I had an advantage many didn't, and it certainly wasn't my innate musicality. Rather, my sister, 6 years older than I, had been a favorite of Mr. T's. Although her cello playing was perhaps only marginally better than my attempts at the violin, she was diligent and devoted, not only participating in the orchestra, but also studying in Mr. T's music theory class. I lived in the enviable place of her afterglow. Over my high school career, as I sawed away at the back of the violin section and volunteered my scant talents for the pit orchestras for every spring musical, consanguinity was the key to my success. Once at the end of the school day when I was a senior, after the orchestra dispersed, my sister came by to visit with Mr. T. We three were the only ones left in the room, me a pale shadow of my sister, beloved mostly for her sake. As I struggled to grasp what Mr. T was saying through his sudden onslaught of tears, I pieced together that his partner was dying. These were the terrible times when it seemed like AIDS was everywhere. Over the next few years, the scourge would claim my English teachers from 10th grade and 11th grade, my 7th grade science teacher, my high school drama teacher. Some years later, Mr. T would also succumb. But on that spring day, my sister, then already in medical school, had simply come to visit her favorite teacher. Mr. T wept, and she hugged him as I stood silently by, my sister understanding better than I that Mr. T's days of relentlessly pushing his young musicians toward greatness were numbered. Several weeks later, with graduation looming, I played in my final concert in the high school auditorium. After we'd taken our bows, I slowly walked off the stage, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. My head bowed, I nearly bumped into Mr. T, who was waiting for me in the wings, the tuxedo he always wore to our performances, soaked with sweat. He looked at me, a rare smile crossing his lips. "You will be missed," he said. "You will too, Mr. T. You will too."
Judy Andrews is a proud 2-degree graduate, a bachelor's in liberal arts and a master's in English and creative writing, both from the City College of New York. She's written, among other works, 2 suspense thrillers and a collection of poetry entitled The Gathering of Gemstones. She's worked as an educator, a freelance writer and editor, and she frequently explores social issues in her writing with favorite topics including foster care, education, history, and Gullah Geechee culture. When she's not writing, Judy enjoys cooking, sightseeing, and long walks in warm rain. In her personal Women in Music story, Judy describes how her experience outdoors in torrential rain during the historic Diana Ross concert in Central Park helped bring about a powerful personal transformation. Returning to the Writers' Read stage with her story, A New Woman, this is Judy Andrews.
The week before my 21st birthday in 1983, I heard through word of mouth that Diana Ross was giving a concert in New York City's Regal Central Park for free. I loved listening to the albums of Diana Ross and the Supremes because my first foster mother, Tina, had tons of records of their hits. I had spent most of my teenage years trying to dress like those gorgeous women. I wanted to be hot like them. I was sure that looking like the Supremes would bring me love. At that time in my life, I needed words of affection. And in college, I developed the subconscious habit of attracting young men who liked me only for my curves and displayed that with sweet words that I ate up until I was full. Even before Diana Ross launched her solo career, I had become passionate about her fashion sense. I loved that she was a classy African-American woman, well-spoken and alluring. I admired her form-fitting jumpsuits with sequins, diamonds, and satin-covered heels. I even had a pink jumpsuit. I loved her music and velvety voice. No other entertainer resembled her. Her hair inspired me to get a weave at age 16 because I thought long hair would bring me loving accolades. The weave lasted a week, and when I removed it, my hair was so thin, I had to wear braid extensions for months. I ran to the movie theater alone to watch Miss Ross in Lady Sings the Blues. Oh, how spectacular she was with Billy D. Williams. I also skipped to the theater alone to see Miss Ross in Mahogany and then The Wiz. I was so thrilled about seeing Miss Ross in the Central Park concert that I invited everyone I knew to join me, but I ended up going with my foster sisters and my new boyfriend, Colin. I wanted him to like me so much that I agreed to meet him at 72nd Street, the subway stop, near the token booth window, because he didn't want to pick me up at my foster home. I waited and waited for him to say I looked beautiful. Not one word. And when we arrived at the concert, he left me and my sisters for another woman. Something spiritual happened to me as I watched the dancers open the show, and then Miss Ross appeared in a multicolored, full-length duster coat singing, "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." She was mesmerizing as she unveiled an orange sequin jumpsuit under the coat. I, along with the audience of nearly 1 million people, cheered with glee. 30 minutes into the show, though a torrential rain began to soak everyone, but Miss Ross remained calm as she sang Endless Love, talking to the crowd in between singing, imploring us to safely seek shelter. She was majestic, all while getting sopping wet. In the warm rain on that July day, a feeling of peacefulness came over me. I wondered, how did she get that way? How did she get to be so calm during a severe rainstorm? I was mesmerized by her demeanor. She could have been electrocuted, just holding a microphone near all of that wiring. Yet she stood there like a goddess, commanding her people to understand the rain is for flowers. I wanted to do that. Her love, beauty, and grace were signs of inner strength that I believed she embraced during the turbulent 60s while on the road. In that moment, a sense of maturity came over me and inspired me to search for my own loveliness. In 30 minutes, I had changed. A pouring rain on a warm summer day covered me with insight. Something came alive in me, and I was the first one to see it. I returned to the concert the next day, a stunning day, a new woman.
So who else in the house was at that concert with those million people? Is anybody else in here? Yeah, I was also at that show, by the way. And I remember when the crowd surged, my friends and I were immediately separated from our blanket and our snacks and our stuff. And then I remember scrambling with dozens of other people over the hoods of gridlocked cars, sort of trying to get away. It was sort of like the scene from that movie Fame, only in a monsoon and without the singing and dancing. And unlike Judy, I did not return the next day for the makeup concert. Anyway, Annie Addington discovered musical theater in her teens, and since then she has traveled the globe, singing, teaching, and performing on stages from New York to Berlin to Moscow. And along the way, she pursued graduate studies in jazz and composition at the SUNY Purchase Conservatory. In addition to her music, Annie moves the world forward through her work as a therapist. She co-founded with her husband the Institute of Body and Soul in Holland, where she was the leader of a women's empowerment group helping those dealing with childhood abuse. Thanks to an ear for language as well as song, Annie speaks both Dutch and German, but agreed today to perform her women in music story, Infinite Possibilities, in English. Luckily. And she invites us to join her in Russia during a time far less fraught than ours. Annie incidentally traveled all the way from Sarasota, Florida to appear today on our stage and is therefore the winner of this show's second longest commute award. Please say hello to Annie Addington.
In 1958, when I was 12, I was told that the canned food and the bottled water that was in the basement was there in case Russia attacked the United States with a nuclear bomb. 31 years later, in December of 1989, I was on an Aeroflot flight to perform at a Russian army base outside of Moscow. We opened with the song Face to Face that I wrote together with Olga Rojnova and her husband. I had met Olga and her band Voyage in Berlin, Germany, right after the wall came down. That is where we wrote and recorded Face to Face. Our video of that song, filmed later at Moscow One TV, was played at the Gorbachev-Bush summit meeting. Before our first performance at the Army base, they allowed us to relax in their sauna, and they served us tea in a samovar. Olga and Voyage, already very famous in Russia, opened the show. I was backstage, waiting to be called. I had the thought, well, here I am, a 43-year-old jazz singing psychotherapist on stage in Moscow. I was so nervous that my palms were just sweating. It was the first time in my life that they really had sweat. Thankfully, there was a statue of Lenin covered with a little bit of red velvet around the base, and that is where I was able to wipe my sweating palms. Then I heard Olga call my name, and the massive red curtains opened. Red velvet curtains. A soldier was pumping smoke in the wings. I had translated what I wanted to cry out as I began, and it was the words deep friendship. Gluboki družba. Later in the show, it was hilarious, singing our new song, Top Secret Sex, for the generals in the front row. That was the beginning of a 3-year music project of finding common ground, not only between the USA and USSR, but between heavy metal and jazz and rock and original material. Together, Voyage and I even performed the most personal of my songs, including several songs written together with my music partner in Berlin, Bertolt Schramm. Every night at Olga's home, we'd sit in a circle with people from the TV station, with other musicians, with family and friends, and filmmakers. Most of all, I remember in the beautiful mix of languages that we were able to communicate so easily. We felt, we knew, we were just the same. Eventually, we were able to tour throughout Germany. We also played an American Army base in Frankfurt. In my wildest dreams, I could never have imagined such an incredible experience. It showed me how miraculously a life can be lived. I learned performance after performance that we create our own reality. Along the way, I remembered a pathwork lecture from Eva Pirakos called Infinite Possibilities of Experience Hindered by Emotional Dependency. Well, the words infinite possibilities just kind of screamed out to me. I thought, anything is possible, really, really. Now, what forces had come together to create this wonderful story? Music. Music is the common language that we all speak, and it's music that brings us together. Now, more than 30 years later, with trying to silence the goodness we discovered through music all those years ago in the country's name itself, Russia, instantly creates bad vibes, just as it did back in 1959. However, despite all the great suffering today in Ukraine and in Russia, I will always remember the incredible closeness and togetherness I was able to experience through the shared infinite possibilities of music. And I know that that song has not ended. In fact, every morning, I check my Gmail, I look at Facebook, I open Duolingo, and I am now on day 343 of studying Russian. The music is calling me back.
Dorothy Barnhouse moved to New York City right after college with a degree in history and a talent for typing. Her first job as a staff writer at a business newsletter was in the Empire State Building, where her boss often commented on how fast she typed. "I'm not typing," she'd remind him, "I'm writing." Dorothy was grateful to leave that job for freelance work where none of her clients could hear her write. She received an MFA from Columbia. She's now a literary consultant and editor, and her published work appears in various journals, including the Adirondack Review. She lives with her husband in Brooklyn, where they raised their 2 daughters, and today still writes with a view of the Empire State Building. Dorothy's story on hearing Patti Smith's Horses for the first time, 47 years ago, brings us back to those heady days of FM radio and, yes, punk rock. Please give a woman in music punk rock star welcome to Dorothy Barnhouse.
I was in high school, living under my parents' roof in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, when I first heard Patti Smith's Horses. The song came over the airwaves of the FM station I used to listen to every night as I did homework. My father didn't approve of this habit. He often knocked on my door to scold me, but stopped short of commanding me to turn the radio off. He must have known how futile that would be. I'd already announced that I wasn't going to go to church anymore. I delivered that news like a fact, my voice hard and mean, tight from a lifetime of rules. It was late, dark behind my curtains when the song came on. The house was quiet, my parents long asleep. My memory has me not at my desk, but standing in the middle of my room. The music must have drawn me to my feet, where I could listen with my whole body. I'd never heard such sounds before. A mumbling start, a scratch from a guitar. I played guitar. I'd moved on from youth group praise songs to Joni Mitchell.
I practiced her intricate chords. This was not that. This was simplicity. 2 fingers on 3 strings, raw and sharp. It didn't matter that I didn't comprehend the lyrics, that I'd never heard of Rimbaud, that the closest I'd come to taking mind-altering drugs was smoking Marlboro Reds. I recognized words from my life, locker and hallway, and those words were delivered not so much as story told, but as story lived. When the voice cried out, "Suddenly," I held my breath. The chant that followed, "Horses, horses," was my exhale. This wasn't just air from lungs. This was anguish and truth, and somehow it became mine. So that when the guitar and bass pivoted into fast and unceasing rock and roll, and the woman sang, "Do you know how to pony?" I answered full-throated, spinning around my room, jumping and flailing, until the song began to slow into hallucination, all screech and poetry, and its pulse, a snare and a hi-hat, finally came to a quiet stop. I sank to the shag carpet and knelt close to the radio. All I needed was the name of this artist. A few weeks later, again in my room and again listening to the radio, the DJ announced he was taking requests. I jumped at the chance. "Horses," I said into the phone when the DJ picked up. "By Patti Smith," I added, just in case. The DJ paused, then said, "We're not playing that." I was shocked. I expected to be placated at least, but there was no maybe or we'll try. I was outright dismissed. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the phone. Was the song too long? Too offensive? Not commercial enough? Was Western Pennsylvania not yet ready for this sound? I felt alone and isolated. But then something else started to happen. I realized I'd been singled out. I'd been in the right place at the right time. The DJ, hardly knowing, had thrown a new album on the turntable, and there I was, ready for it. It was as if Patti herself had traveled over the airwaves and swooped down into my suburban cul-de-sac to find me, needy, eager, searching for a new voice. "Got to lose control," she sings, "and then you take control." I turned the radio off. I picked up my guitar. My fingers found a chord, and my voice borrowed Patti's words. Up there is a sea of possibility. Seize the possibility. And I knew what my father must have known all along, that the radio would pull me away, transform and remake me. All it took was one song to help me see the possibility.
Anne Levin is a widely published writer and book reviewer and recovering journalist. She enjoyed a long career at the Associated Press covering elections and every imaginable human and natural disaster. Originally also from Western Pennsylvania, Anne traveled north to Smith College for her undergrad studies, south to U Texas for her creative writing graduate degree, and finally opted for the East, that is, New York's Upper East Side, where she and her husband now live. Anne's work appears regularly in many journals like Sensitive Skin, Southeast Review, Potato Soup Journal, and Smoky Blue Literary and Arts Magazine. Anne is a frequent contributor to Writers Read, and in her women in music story, Let It Bleed, she honors the woman who really put Mick Jagger in his place. Please welcome Anne Levin.
The house was empty when I got home from summer school. My parents were at work, my siblings away. I went upstairs, queued up the album, then sprawled out face down on my sister's bed staring at her pastel-colored wall-to-wall carpet. It was 1970, I was 16, and that was the summer I hated everyone and everything and listened to Gimme Shelter 1,000 times. I was also starving myself all day and binging at night, waking up the next morning and just wanting to die. The song I was obsessed with was on the album Let It Bleed. And when I wasn't staring at the rug, I would study its bright cover. It showed a cake hovering over a turntable with layers made from a film canister, a clock face, a bicycle tire, and a pizza. On the top, nestled in the frosting, were red and yellow candies and tiny figures of the Rolling Stones. When the first track was over, I would heave myself up off the bed and play it again. I felt the opening bars in my body, the stabbing guitar riff, the kick of the drums, the spooky, shivery chorus of oohs. I thought I heard Mick sing, "My, We're Alive Today," even though he didn't, as if to echo my disbelief that I'd survived another night. And when he sang, "If I don't get some shelter, I'm going to fade away," I realized that was exactly what I had to do, fade away into a skinnier version of me. I hadn't always been a Stones fan. When I was in 6th grade, I danced in our big brick-floored living room to satisfaction. But the next year, when Under My Thumb came out, I knew those English lads, the evil twins of the Beatles, weren't really my friends. Even parts of Gimme Shelter put me off. Mick's sing-songy voice and the way he recited the lyrics as if he were reading aloud a metered poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. It was the other voice on the album that gave me hope, the voice that emerged from the chorus, perfectly pitched, ready to soar. A strong voice, stronger than Mick's, strong enough to lift me up off my sister's narrow bed, away from my drafty old house in a small town in western Pennsylvania. For a few seconds, I was flying. I was queen of the world, and there wasn't anything I couldn't do. She sings the chorus 3 times. Rape, murder, it's just a shot away. It's just a shot away. The 3rd time, her voice cracks. That's when you can hear Mick exclaim in the background, "Whoa," like even he, the street-fighting man, couldn't believe what he'd heard. In the next verse, he describes a fire sweeping the streets, a red coal carpet, and mad bull that's lost its way. But in her voice, I could hear how all that destruction and desolation might feel. At the very end, he tacks on a hopeful ending. "I tell you, love, sister, it's just a kiss away." But I didn't buy it, not for a second. Men like Mick Jagger only kiss skinny models and movie stars. Even then, I knew that the truer words were screamed and shouted by the backup singer, who I later found out was named Mary Clayton. And even though she was singing about 2 of the worst things that could ever happen to a person, the sound of her voice, with its bottomless layers of grief and loss, made me desperate to live. Around the 4th or the 5th or the 100th time I played it, I would hear a rustle in the kitchen. It was my mother, home from work. "Honey," she'd call upstairs, "come help me make dinner." Then I would get up from my sister's bed with a sinking feeling in my stomach and head downstairs into the threatening storm.
Joanna FitzPatrick was born and raised in Hollywood, so it's perhaps no surprise that her first forays into writing were screenplays. But Joanna also flourished in the music business with work that brought her frequently to New York City, where she embraced the city's nightlife, dancing till dawn, all-night jam sessions, hailing taxis after midnight. All of this was a welcome escape from what was to her California's excessive sunshine. Along the way, she raised 2 children and finished her education, including an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence College. She's written several novels, and her most recent, The Artist Colony, is an historical mystery set in Carmel by the Sea. And by the way, Joanna is today's first place winner for longest commute. She could easily have chosen to attend tonight's Academy Awards ceremony, but instead traveled all the way from California to accept our invitation to perform her work on this stage. So that's... In her music career, Joanne went on to represent the Manhattan Transfer and other dynamic singers known for their riveting performances, and had the good fortune to work with and learn lifelong lessons from some extraordinary performers, including Bette Midler, as you'll hear in her personal Carnegie Hall Women in Music story, Basking in Divine Light. Please give a very warm welcome to Joanna FitzPatrick.
In the 60s and 70s in Hollywood, we women in music were women in bed with musicians. Or we were groupies. Or we danced in cages at Whiskey A Go-Go. Or, myself, we were humble servants for showbiz bosses who ran the show. I had just been hired by one of those bosses. I didn't have any experience as a secretary, but my mother had made sure I was a fast typist and a shorthand star. Something to fall back on, she'd said, as if she knew I'd be divorced and destitute before I turned 30. My first assignment was to pick up my boss's client, arriving from New York at the Los Angeles airport. How will I recognize her? I asked. He said, you can't miss her. In the crowded arrival hallway, I dropped my sign when a spiritual vision in neon came into my sight. A tiny person with breasts bubbling like uncorked champagne from the tight bodice of her flaring red dress, strutted toward me in glittery red platform shoes and flaming red hair. She was everything I wasn't. Exuberant, extravagant, joyous, and wildly independent. Need I ask her if she was the divine Miss M? At rehearsals, I watched Bette do her own choreography. She knew what she wanted, and she got it from her manager and everyone else who worked with her, not by coercion or intimidation, but through her unique brand of integrity. She treated her backup singers, the harlots, and the musicians and the stagehands with dignity. We were all part of the show, and we loved it, and we loved her. Several months later, I achieved the impossible, or so thought my boss. I not only organized his messy office, but as Bette's watchdog, sheltered her through an emergency appendectomy by keeping her fans away from the hospital. And I gave Bette her first driving lesson. The boss gave me a bonus and then ordered a limo to bring me to Bette's concert on New Year's Eve, 1975. Serendipity. A previously unemployed single mom raising a 6-year-old daughter without alimony or child support was stepping into a limo and sinking into its plush leather seat. My skin-tight bronze satin jumpsuit and 3-inch gold lame stilettos sparkled as I flew through the night in my black winged chariot,
sipping champagne, blasting Bet's singing Friends on the stereo, and thinking, life can't get any better than this. My seat was second row in the sold-out 3,000-seat Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. The curtain went up, and Bet, seductively stretched out on a hospital bed, was rolled on stage. Her original concert dates had been postponed after her appendectomy. In a flash, she was off that bed and strutting across the massive stage in her chunky platform shoes, pouring her heart into every lyric of Do You Wanna Dance? Throughout her 2.5-hour performance, Bet released her exuberant, compassionate spirit into the rafters, and I sucked it in until it became my own. She filled me with her impassioned voice until I heard my own. And like her, I knew I could survive the slings and arrows thrown by those who were afraid of my strength, of her strength. We had a job to do, and we were going to do it together. After going backstage and telling her how much I loved her show, I strode out of that theater in my silky jumpsuit, aware of the stares I received as I slipped into the waiting limo. Everyone thought I was somebody. But more important, I thought so too. That night, I realized I did not need a man to live an exciting, creative life. I didn't need his limelight to bring me out of the dark. I had my own light. I just had to open the door and let it out. And the divine Miss M had shown me exactly how to do it.
Music has always been a grand passion for Ellen Nenner. It propelled her from New York's famous High School of Music and Art to the even more famous Juilliard School. Today, she's a trustee at Master Voices, a not-for-profit performing arts institution dedicated to the power of the human voice. Ellen studied economics and philosophy at Mount Holyoke, urban planning at the New School, and was a writer and editor for McKinsey. Luckily for us, Ellen also studied at the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute, where her facility with words took her in new directions. Today, Ellen, who recently moved from Queens to a new apartment within walking distance to Symphony Space and Zabar's, is working on a book of connected essays and short stories for her daughters, Lisa and Jackie, and her grandson, Colby. In the story that closes today's Carnegie Hall Women in Music event, A Prelude to Love, Ellen revisits her musical roots. I'm very proud to welcome back to the Writers' Read stage, Ellen Nenner.
It's been with me a long time, this love. I don't remember when or how it began, but I do remember my parents asking me what I wanted for my birthday. I was to turn 14 in December. A piano, I said without hesitation. December arrived, and with it, a mahogany Chickering baby grand with a piano stool I could raise and lower. It occupied a corner of the living room of our Washington Heights apartment, which overlooked Broadway. My mother decorated the piano with her prized Spanish shawl, profuse with vermilion roses, climbing vines, and fringe. I didn't like the shawl. Splayed across the top, I imagined it suffocating the piano's voice. The shawl was inert, dead. The piano was vibrant and alive. Izzy Greenberg was my piano teacher. He looked old to me because he was bald, but he was probably only in his 50s. He was kind and patient and made my lessons a joy. When I played something particularly well, he'd stroke my hands and say, "Good, good, Ellen." One day, as he was leaving, he said, "Amelia, I shouldn't be teaching Ellen. She needs someone better. Take her to Juilliard and let her audition." And so my mother did. My piano lessons at Juilliard were on Saturday morning, and every week I took the A train from Washington Heights to Broadway and 117th Street in time for my 8:30 lesson. Each Saturday began and ended with stomach cramps. My piano teacher's name was Emily Bokel. She was a large woman who sat in a large seat to the right of the piano bench. She was addicted to malted milk balls. One Saturday, my love almost left me. Miss Bokel was ensconced in her chair, dipping into a bowl of milk balls, cradled in a depression she had made in her skirt. I raised my hands to the keyboard. "Curved fingers, Ellen, knuckles up and rounded," she ordered. "Imagine you're holding a tennis ball." I struck the first 5 notes of the Chopin Prelude. "That's bad, Ellen, bad playing," she thundered, the malted milk balls rolling across her lap as she leaned forward to tap my fingers with her pencil. "Where is the singing tone? The legato? You've ignored all my markings." I sat stock still, desperate to leave the room. How could 5 notes be so wrong, I asked myself. We worked on the Prelude for the remainder of the lesson, after which I was to play before a panel of Juilliard instructors. This was the last step in my annual review and determined whether or not I would continue at the school. That afternoon, I entered the rehearsal room to face the 4 panelists, each member with a pad and pencil at the ready. I approached the ebony Steinway. "I'm going to play Chopin's Prelude No. 6 in B minor." I began, and after just 1 or 2 minutes, I stopped. My fingers suddenly didn't know where to go. I stared at the empty music stand. Playing from memory was required. "Take a deep breath and start again," one of the instructors said quietly. I tried, but the notes were gone, beyond recovery. I rose from the piano bench, excused myself, and left the room, ashamed of my pitiful performance. And shortly after, I left Juilliard. My mother was heartbroken for me, but soon Saturday no longer brought cramps and anxiety. It brought joy and Mr. Greenberg. The Chickering baby grand, the Spanish shawl long gone, sits in my living room. I sometimes run my fingers across the keyboard, the natural keys now more cream-colored than white. My vision is impaired, and so I rarely attempt to play. My concert seats are always on the left side of the hall. It is the vantage point which best allows me to watch the pianist's fingers, knuckles up and rounded, miraculously at work.
Ricky, stay here with me. Will all the writers please join me here on stage? All the writers come on back. We built Writers Read around live performances like this one, and I'm proud to be here with this group of fine writers, and proud of what a very small group of committed unpaid volunteers has accomplished and continues to build with me. As I explained earlier, there are lots of moving parts to this organization, and we have room and we have need for volunteers and advisory team members to help us steer it. especially in the areas of marketing and finance. So do reach out if you would like to discuss, and you can always reach me with thoughts or suggestions through the website or at writersread.org. I do hope that you'll follow the podcast and allow us to stay in touch by joining our email list. None of us want to receive more email, but we'll just do it twice a month, and you can unsubscribe with one click at any time. We will be back in this room 2 p.m. Saturday, May 13th for our special pre-Mother's Day event, so please do save that date. Do remember to take your program with you and share it with another writer in your life, and please do consider a charitable and tax-deductible gift to Writers Read to help us grow. We can't do what we do without you, and this round of applause from all of us here on this stage is for all of you. Thank you. Please don't rush off while there is still wine to drink and people to meet, and we have a little reception going on in the gallery right after the show. And if you enjoyed yourself today, please do tell your friends about us. And now we're going to do one last thing, and we have not rehearsed this. We're going to do a bow. Hold on, watch this. Hold on.
Let's go.